Hi there. I was thinking about something that I noticed and notice all the time when I'm teaching, specifically teaching yoga. It doesn't happen as much in the same way when I'm lecturing, say anatomy or something along those lines. I notice and I'm very aware when people aren't listening. And most people would think, like, well, yeah, it's obvious when people aren't listening. But the thing that I'm really present to is that it's not just that they're not listening, like they don't hear me. And it's definitely not personal. It's a skill that I believe our society has bred out of people. And I think that that's a big reason why communication can be so hard with other human beings. Our society, and I could bring up conspiracy theory BS, but I'm not going to. Our society wants us to be followers. So, what I notice in my students is oftentimes the ones that aren't listening are also the ones that have the hardest time in class. And not necessarily because they're not in the right place or they're not doing the right postures, but because they're not really present. They're moving through the motions and they're watching what everyone else is doing and they're mimicking. So it's monkey see, monkey do, so to speak. And so there's no person inside of that process. I was observing a student doing it this evening when I was teaching. And she could hear me because there were times I noticed that she would do what I said, that she wouldn't have known what anyone else was doing. So it was like her brain clicked on and she started listening to me when she couldn't see anyone else for whatever reason based off of the posture that we were in. And it got me thinking. Yoga teaches us how to listen. It not only teaches us how to listen externally to the cues that we're being given, the things that we're being told, but it teaches us how to learn internally and to listen internally to what's coming up for us. And I think it's really easy as teachers to get extremely frustrated with our students because we're just like, they're not listening. And I think some of it is that we take it personal and that we think that they don't like what we're teaching. And it may be that they don't like what we're teaching, but it has a lot more to do with there's so much happening in their brains and they're conditioned to mimic. So we all are conditioned to mimic. So yoga brings us out of that process of mimicking and actually being present. And so listening and not listening to react, not listening to copy, not listening to perform, but listening to recognize what our personal next steps are, not listening to see ahead, but listening to settle in to the moment, helps us move into being more comfortable in the moment. And when we're more comfortable in that moment, then we don't have to be two steps ahead of people. We feel safer with what's happening present moment, moment by moment, because I think the concept of like trying to be ahead is basically a scarcity mindset. Like you're afraid that if you're not two steps ahead that you're going to miss out on something, or if you're not doing what everyone else is doing, you're going to miss out on something. And so the act of listening also brings you into completely and fully owning yourself as a person and the path that you're meant to take. Even in our yoga class, because a teacher could be presenting something and you have an injury and you can't do that pose. If you do that pose, you will make your injury worse. So then you prolong that injury, which is why oftentimes you'll hear your teachers say that injuries are a blessing, because that blessing is something that's bringing you back to your moment. It's kind of like the fly that buzzes around your head. It's like, hey, I'm here, I'm here, I'm here, I'm here. That injury is the same thing. It's like, hey, I'm here, pay attention to me, here, I'm here. So it's like your psyche, your spiritual self, trying to bring you back into your body. Or it could be a physical example of something that you're not listening to, you're not doing in your life, you're not making happen. Like foot, ankle, leg, knee, hip injuries oftentimes can be because you're not following through, you're not moving forward in something in your life. And we can notice that when we move forward, for example, in that knee injury or that ankle injury, that those problems start to go away. So this is how the physical and the psychological and the emotional start to blend and come together. And it all stems back to, are you listening? Are you present? Can you be with where you are? Can you be with how you feel? Can you be with what's present? Or are you always 2 steps ahead? Or are you always following? And not that it's a judgment, because I believe that we all do this. This is a process that we must learn and that we must move through in order to fully blossom, in order to fully be and become who we are meant to be. So the question is, are you listening? When your teacher walks in the room, are you listening? Or are you trying to be ahead? Are you listening to yourself when you walk in the room? When you sit down to meditation? So many times people say like, oh, I can't stop my mind. It's not your job. That's your human condition. Your job is to observe. Your job is to notice. And in that noticing, in that observing, all the information that you need is laid out before you. Your intuition pops up in those spaces, and your steps forward happen in those moments. So are you listening? Have a good night.